I'm Jason Belzer for AthleticDirectorU, and I am joined today by Chad Weiberg, the Director of Athletics at Oklahoma State University. Chad, you took or became the Director of Athletics at Oklahoma State on July 1st, which happens to coincide with the day that college athletics in many ways was turned upside down with new name, image, and likeness legislation. And certainly coming off of a pandemic that we are still in, it's been a very tumultuous last 2 years, 6 months. So not an easy time to take over a massive organization with hundreds of employees. You didn't even really have a honeymoon period to begin with. You were thrown directly into the fire. Tell me about your first 2 months, 3 months on the job. And was there a decision that you were faced with early on where it finally kind of hit you, this is all on me and I have to figure this out because I'm in charge now?
Well, you're right. July 1st was the day that NIL hit, and of course, you're thinking that's going to be the big issue at the time, and it was a big issue. The fortunate thing is we knew it was coming, right? That was one that we were planning for and preparing for, and our team, our staff, I think had done a really good job to get us as ready as we could be for July 1 to hit. Nobody had all the answers, or probably still has all the answers of how this is evolving and unfolding. But I felt really good about our plan that we had put in place at that point, and so it was just we're going about the business of executing it as we could get started there after July 1. In addition to all the other things that are happening around that time, whether that's getting ready to recover from COVID, open up the stadium, get ready to have full fans again for football season and soccer, et cetera, for the fall. So that's what we were doing. Was also trying to build the team a little bit, obviously backfill the position that I just moved out of with our Deputy Athletic Director, Reed Sigmund, that we were very fortunate to be able to get on the team. And then the 21st day hit is what it happened to be when the news broke about Texas and Oklahoma. And so, that certainly, if there was any kind of honeymoon period, that certainly felt like the end of that. And so, immediately started working with our new president. It was also her first 21 days. It was on the 21st day of her tenure as well. And so I don't know that I felt that the decision for the institution was on me at that point. Because that is something that big, it really is an institutional decision. So really it is going to end up being the CEOs of the universities that ultimately make those decisions along with the board and those kinds of things. But I very much felt like, that I was helping guide it, that a lot of the, just people were looking at me to help, answer some questions and, give advice or, what were my thoughts and all of those things. And of course, I kept opening that, that file drawer, looking for the file about, how's this supposed to work, and there wasn't one, and so you just, you're in uncharted territory in a lot of ways, and so you just got to figure it out. And fortunately, again, had great president. Dr. Schrum was great to work with. Our board was great, and then just other, the people on my team, were great. Just to be able to talk through those things, and then just colleagues around the country, they're in the business or out of the business or whatever it may be, that I just was able to call and talk to and bounce ideas off and get thoughts from and those kinds of things, and just try to use all of that to inform my decision making as much as possible, or at least my advice that I was going to give to Dr. Schrum, to the board, et cetera, just as we worked through that. And so
Was there was a lot of things going on in the media at that point, and in those types of situations, you can maybe even say it's every school for themselves. And how did that factor into your decision? I mean, obviously you have to in some way you're still a member of a conference and you have loyalty to the other institutions that are still there, but you still have to make a decision that is removed.
Right.
Is it you have to make a truly objective decision, but it really is subjective in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
What's best for us in this particular moment to move forward? How does that decision-making process even happen, and how do you?
Yeah. All of our jobs, I think, are first and foremost to our institutions, right? We are proud members of the Big 12 Conference, and that's very important to us. But I think everyone realized that in a moment in time like that, first and foremost, we've got to do what's best for our institutions. In this case, for Oklahoma State University, and so you go about trying to figure out what is best for the institution. But it was very important to us, and I give Dr. Schrum a lot of credit for this, as it was very important for her, after going through the experience that we had just gone through with a couple of our, member institutions, that we were going to try to do whatever ended up being the right thing for us to do the right way, and so work with our colleagues so that if it was something other than, staying together, which I never got there, so I don't want to, give any indication of that. But if it were, that we were going to be, above board with it, and use the system and processes that are in place. I think that was an important part of being a good, partner with our other member institutions at that point in time, not knowing where all this was going. And I don't say that in any way of trying to be critical to the way, anything else was handled at all. It's just that moment in time, being through what we'd been through, we made the decision that was how we were going to handle it, if that's where it ended up being. Of course, it didn't, and that's a great thing. I think we all feel really good about where it did end up being, and the longer this kind of goes, I think the better we all feel about it.
So, as we make our way through our careers and work our way up the ladder, we often look up at the decisions that people who are managing us make, and we say, when I'm in their seat, I'm going to do it differently. And then when we actually get into their seat, we realize, well, maybe I can't do it differently, or this is... Have you dealt with that in the last 6 months? And if so, why? What changed? Obviously, your perspective now looking down versus looking up. Why is it so much more difficult to make a decision when all of the consequences of that decision now rest on your shoulders?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think that's a human nature sort of thing. I go back to, even parenting, right? When you're the child, you think, I'm not, when I'm a parent, I'm going to do things different, and then you end up being a parent, and all of a sudden you're doing things very similar.
Yes, you turn into your parents.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think for me, it just was a recognition. I tried, as the closer I got, to the athletic director position, being a deputy or whatever, I just tried to, I understood that I can't put myself in that chair, as close as I might be to it. And unfortunately, I had the opportunity to work with really good athletic directors that involved me as much as they could. But even then, I knew, that it will be different if someday I get that opportunity. And so I tried very hard not to even have those thoughts, because I knew, that I could. But that was all going to go out the window when I did actually get into that chair, because you don't know the dynamics or the external forces or internal forces or any of those things that are fully, bearing on some of those decisions until you're there and you're experiencing those. So I tried not to do that, and I don't know that I have any great examples of already in the first 4 months of experiencing that, although I'm sure I have, that's just, part of it, but yeah, but I know that it has happened.
You talk about forces, and I think people in the industry that are in your chair now can appreciate or understand that you have to deal with a lot of constituencies. You have your student athletes, you have your coaches, you have your administrators, you have your president, your board of trustees, your donors, your fans, then the media at large. And as a human being, it's very difficult to manage all of these people and make all of them happy. In fact, it's impossible, right? You can't make everybody happy at all times. And because of that, I think human nature says there's a little bit of a self-preservation. You have to kind of say, all right, who do I need to answer to right now in this particular situation to make? How do you define that? I mean, is it I have to make sure that my president or my chancellor is first and foremost, or is it my student athletes that are first and foremost? Or in a particular situation, maybe it's the coaches, or maybe it's a donor. How do you manage that? I mean, and that's a big part of, being an AD. And you were at Oklahoma State before. You were at similar institutions, Texas Tech, Kansas State. They operate in similar ways. So you've had a long time to see some of that. But has that changed now that you are in the chair and having to deal with it?
Well, I think that that's all a really good question, and you're right about all of it. And because of all of that, I think the most important thing is to, for you to understand what you are about, and what is important to you, in your decision making. Because if you start letting all those external forces start dictating what you think is right and the right thing to do, that's, I think, when you're going to get off, and maybe potentially have the potential to make the wrong decisions. And again, that is in no way, I mean, obviously, yes, I mean, the president is my boss, and so, you've got to listen to what all of these constituents, that's all part of intaking the information that you're going to use to make a decision. And clearly the president is probably, first and foremost in that, right? But I think that she looks to me, to make, that is my job, is to make the best decisions for the athletic department that we can make. I know that that's what she expects me to do, and so I've got to do that based on who I am and what I think is right for all of those situations, whatever they may be. And what do you base those on? And I think we talk a lot about the student athletes. We use the words being our true north. That when we are making decisions, we're going to get down to, well, how does this impact the student athletes? What is the right thing to do for them? So that's going to be the first thing that we look at. But through that lens, you've got to come back to who you are and what's the right thing to do in those situations.
We were talking earlier because you mentioned, and I agree, right? The student athlete needs to be your true north. But we're beginning to see in college athletics, or maybe it's been around for a long time, this constant escalation. And now, you have to pay a college football coach $10 million. But at the end of the day, is that really better for the student athlete? How does that, the market dictates one thing, yeah. But at the same time, is a $10 million coach better than a $1 million coach versus, when it comes down to the student athlete's experience?
Right. Those are all really, really good questions. And, I do think part of the true north for the student athlete is putting the best people around them that we can put around them. The coaches are the professors, the teachers, the mentors for them in a very, important way. I mean, that coaches do have a very important role, I think, in the life of our student athletes while they're at Oklahoma State and beyond. I think it does. I'd like to think that it shapes, a lot of who our student athletes become once they leave Oklahoma State. We talk about, we are part of an educational enterprise, and we are part of a university. We are on a campus, and we teach a lot of classes, right? Our classrooms look very different. They're stadiums, they're arenas, they're practice facilities, and our lessons may be a little bit different than what you're maybe learning in economics or engineering or whatever, but we're teaching, leadership and discipline and teamwork and perseverance and all of those things I think will help shape student athletes to be great members of society, mothers, fathers, etc. And so it's really important. It's critically important, I think, who we're putting around our student athletes and teaching those lessons. But you have to balance that with the resources that you have as well, right? And so we're going to do whatever we can to keep the best people and get the best people around our student athletes. I think we've done a really good job with that. But there are market forces at play, and there's a lot of things that go into that besides just the money. I mean, these coaches make decisions on things besides just the money, right? And
or we hope so.
Yeah,
hope
and so and every one of them is different. There's no two that are alike either, and so all the situations are different. You just have to manage those as best you can as they come, and again, just stay true to who you are, and as an institution, as a culture that we have, and as the leadership that you have too. And so I think that's how we've tried to approach it and how we'll continue to approach it.
So to kind of wrap the conversation, looking back at the last 5.5 months that you've been an AD, really two questions. Number one is, if you can go back to the morning of July 1st and give yourself some advice, what would it be? And maybe it's really the same question. What would your advice be to other ADs, first-time ADs, as they enter the space, hopefully in a less tumultuous time?
Yeah, I had, as we all do, I think anybody who kind of gets to the position that they want to get, you have not gotten there on your own, and I certainly didn't. I mean, I had the great fortune of being around just tremendous people, tremendous mentors that helped me. I tried the best I could to watch them and absorb as much of what they do and how they do it as I possibly could. Obviously, most recently, Coach Holder, before me, I watched him, and Kirby. I mean, I don't want to start naming names because I'll leave way too many people out because I had so many. But I, will never. So it's important, I think, at least it was for me, to try to absorb as much of that as I could, but knowing that it had to be absorbed in a way that it was going to fit me, and I can't be them, I've got to be me, and that, I think, was the best advice that I got. When the news broke that I was going to get the position, I had a bunch of these people that started reaching out to me to congratulate me, and so my immediate response to a lot of them was, well, I'll take any advice that you're willing to give me. My ears are open, and several of them, I mean, the majority of them, the advice they sent back was, be you. Don't quit being you. That's what put you in this position. That's how you got here, is by being you. And I just thought, wow, that was really, really good advice. So I think that's I'll never forget that, and that's probably what I will use when I'm asked that question as well.
Well, and I think that's testament to the relationships that you've built, and the fact that while it can be a very lonely job at the top, because the decisions come down to you, you have to surround yourself with people that are going to help support you and be there.
Absolutely.
And I hope, for your sake, that the next 6 months of your job are going to be a lot less interesting. Let's make it as boring as possible.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Chad, thank you for joining us today on
AthleticDirectorU.
AthleticDirectorU.
Thank you.